Hi everybody, welcome to Simply Scuba. In today's dive brief, we're going to be focusing on your SPG, your submersible pressure gauge, because 2021 was actually quite an interesting year for submersible pressure gauges because of our first pick. So today I figured, let's take a look at 5 of my favorite SPGs right now. The Cressi Digi 2 is the first step into the digital age for submersible pressure gauges. Traditionally, they've always been either just analog gauges with a board-on tube on the inside, or you have been getting more modern transmitters, but they have to pair with your dive computer. But the Digi 2 is effectively a double gauge. It reads out your tank pressure and your depth as well, but all in a digital readout. So it's very quick and intuitive to understand, and the battery life itself, considering the size and what it's doing, it has about 1,000-hour battery life. You've got a little magnetic cover that, one, protects the screen when you're not using it, but two, it actually disables the device so it's not wasting any battery when it's being stored. So these are quickly becoming incredibly popular because instead of just a needle that is quite intuitive, you actually get a digital readout that spells out exactly how much gas and exactly how deep you are. So it's kind of like a dive computer, but it doesn't read out your nitrogen loading or your decompression or anything. So for a really quick, easy gauge to read, the Digi 2 is becoming very popular very quickly. For something a bit more traditional, you get the Oceanic Max Depth Swiv 2 Navcon triple gauge. Now that's a bit of a mouthful. Most of us in the industry just call it the Navcon, and it's a triple gauge. So you get your submersible pressure gauge, you get your depth gauge on the other side, and you get your compass as well. So it's the triple factor, and it covers all bases. What really makes the Navcon stand up above the rest is just how clear and bright the displays are. Each of the backdrops, they are all glow in the dark, so if you shine a torch on them, they'll glow back that green, but during the daytime they are a clear, pristine white, compared to a lot of others which are just kind of off-white, which isn't too great. So you get a great contrast when you're looking at that screen. But also on the submersible pressure gauge, you also get a thermometer, so a small little gauge inside of that screen that gives you actually a fourth gauge that most people don't really notice. It's nice and compact, so you get the depth gauge and your submersible pressure gauge. They're back to back because you don't always need to look at them all at the same time. If you have them all in a straight line, it makes your gauges really quite a long console. But for navigating, you have your compass, which is set at a slight angle, so you can still navigate, you can still monitor your depth, so you're not sawtoothing. But as a general console that covers all bases, the Navcon is a great set of gauges. If you don't want something quite so big or bulky, you just want a submersible pressure gauge, because let's face it, you're diving with a dive computer, you don't need a depth gauge and a compass and whatever, because that's all on your computer. You can get the Oceanic Swiv SPG, which is just a submersible pressure gauge, but again, it has that thermometer built inside. So nice and easy to read, and it's that clear, high contrast screen, makes it really nice and easy to understand. Comes in a protective boot as well, so you get this rubber overmolded boot that has an attachment point, so you can clip bolt snaps off onto it and then clip it onto your BCD. Comes with a hose as well, which if you're building up a set of regulators, you're going to need a hose. So yeah, the Swiv range in general is a great one to consider when you're looking at gauges. For something a little bit more modern, if you take a look at the Nautilus 52mm gauge, this is where a lot of divers are turning to, and these are actually becoming quite an industry standard, especially among the technical communities, in that it has a black face. So instead of that bright white face, which granted, I just said it's amazing in the past couple of gauges, but actually in low light conditions, a bright white face, when you're checking your gauges in overhead environments or during a night dive, it can be quite dazzling. Whereas a black face, you can still read it in low light conditions, but you can also read it in normal conditions. So the black face is quickly becoming a bit more common and standard amongst pressure gauges. And this also comes in the what's usually called a brass and glass body. So instead of the smaller, compact little body, which usually has a plastic fascia, This one has a tempered glass face, and the back of it is made out of marine grade brass, so it's very strong and it doesn't have that rattle neither when you shake it around. And to finish it off, we have the Tauchsport 52mm submersible pressure gauge. Very similar to the previous version, but obviously this has a white face, but incredibly clear and concise details. With a lot of submersible pressure gauges, they tend to put all this kind of color coding onto things and sort of pushy details, and they go a little bit overboard. With a pressure gauge, you just want to know exactly how much gas you have in your tank at that moment. If you're looking at different colors, and of course the colors are going to change depending on your depth, it's a lot to think about. So with the Tauchsport, they just went, nah, we're just going to keep it really clean and simple, and that's exactly what you get. It's nice and tough, as with the previous one. It's brass and glass, but a lot of brass and glass gauges, they don't come with hoses. You have to buy them separately, which one saves you a bit of cost, but also gives you a bit of flexibility in that you can choose what length hose and what style of high pressure hose as well. Just make sure that you do get a high pressure swivel joint, just to connect between the hose and your gauges. Some of them come with them, some of them don't, but yeah, you can choose what type of hose, whether it's a heavier rubber hose or a slimmer braided hose like a MyFlex hose. And those were 5 of my favourite SPGs at the moment. Now, I know it's not the most interesting of subject given it's your gauges, but every diver needs them, and you need them on your set of regulators. I always dive with an analog gauge just because it's that analog backup, just in case my transmitter isn't talking to my computer or the battery runs out. At least I can always check how much gas I have left. Personally, I really like brass and glass just because I find them just a bit tougher and a bit more reliable. I have had some of the cheaper gauges sort of pop off on me during a dive, so it's always important to have a reliable set of gauges that you can always trust. But let me know what you use down in the comments below. Do you like triple gauges, or do you prefer a bit more slimline with a single gauge, heavier brass and glass, or yeah, a nice sort of lightweight slim gauge? Let us know down in the comments below. All of these are available on our website, simplyscuba.com. It's going to be a link to each of them down in the description below. Thank you for watching, and of course, safe diving.